Here on the show floor at the Game Developers Conference, some things are constant from year to year. You got your booths of recruiters, your purveyors of middleware, your awesome games at the IGF. But 2014 will be remembered as the year of the VR headset. Big players like the Oculus Rift and Sony's recently announced Morpheus are joined by a handful of smaller operations in showing their visions of the future of gaming. But is VR actually going to be the future, or will it just be another one of these peripheral fads that we've seen come and go? Two GameSpot editors have been debating this very question, and the first one you're about to hear from, Mark Walton, isn't so optimistic.
He's got you again. He got me from behind. Oh my God, I think I have to take this helmet off. I'm physically feeling the space here for a second.
Does anyone really want virtual reality? There's no denying that it's an impressive, potentially game-changing piece of technology, but it's hard to see consumers abandoning their TVs and strapping a display to their face to play games. It's all the more troublesome for Sony's Project Morpheus, which reeks of Sony hopping on the VR bandwagon, trying to chase down a new and potentially lucrative audience, much like how it and Microsoft developed motion technology following the success of the Wii. And we all know how that turned out, even with a supposed large audience to tap into. And unlike the Wii, for all the Oculus Rift's success with the developer community and games media, without a release date, there's still also no hard evidence that it has wide appeal. There's the classic games peripheral problem to consider too. Developers want a large install base to sell to, but consumers are reluctant to buy into a new piece of tech in large numbers without the games to back it up. Big graphics engine companies like Epic Games, Crytek and Unity have all pledged support for Project Morpheus, but as Nintendo found out with the Wii U, third parties are just as quick to abandon a new platform as they are to support it if it doesn't live up to sales expectations. Both of the big home console makers are hoping to capitalise on VR's recent rebirth, but it is a hope, and right now there's little evidence to suggest that VR is going to reach the kind of critical mass that will entice developers to create games for it in the long term. I'm just hoping history isn't repeating itself and we end up with a bunch of impressive but forgotten peripherals that chase an audience that simply wasn't there.
The man has a point. The history of video games and the shelves of collectors are all littered with gadgets and peripherals that never caught on. Attempts at VR have come and gone before, but this time, Kickstarter successes and widespread critical enthusiasm have some people, including Peter Brown, believing that VR's time has finally come.
While I was playing the game, it seems virtual reality was playing a trick on my mind. The pictures and sounds around me were all that was necessary to convince me I was walking, flying, and falling.
As an admirer of new and interesting hardware, I was immediately drawn to the Oculus Rift when it was announced in 2012. But after a few tests, I wasn't convinced of the long-term success of virtual reality. When I played the port of Doom 3 and walked around a frozen castle in Epic Games' Elemental demo on the Oculus, both of these experiences were mildly exciting, but there was no suspension of disbelief to be had. Apart from motion blur-related queasiness, nothing inside of me felt connected to the experience before my eyes. But fast forward to August 2013. I'm at Gamescom in Cologne, Germany for an appointment with CCP Games to try out its new space combat game, Eve Valkyrie. It had been exactly a year since my first Rift experience, and with memories of motion sickness still fresh in my mind, I suffered sweaty palms and nervous thoughts as I made my way to the demo booth. Little did I know that I was walking into a demo that would forever alter my opinion of VR and its potential to change not only gaming, but our relationship with technology as a whole. Unlike the other experiences I mentioned, Eve Valkyrie was built around the limitations and aims of VR. First, the notion of sitting in a cockpit of a spacecraft translates perfectly to sitting in a chair. Flying a jet doesn't require you to turn your shoulders or walk. Your torso and arms remain stationary whether you're diving, climbing, or turning. Most importantly, apart from controlling your perspective within the cockpit, you can lock on to enemy spacecraft by following them with your gaze. I can't fully explain how great it was to crane my neck backward to lock onto a passing enemy ship, but it was an empowering feeling, and I was immersed in my role as a pilot. Not only are your physical movements accounted for in the virtual world, but the gameplay is enhanced as well. After a few minutes of dogfighting in space, I began to anticipate the effects of centripetal force. My brain had been tricked. And my fate as a VR evangelist took off. Having witnessed firsthand the sort of experiences that only VR can offer, I've seen that there's more to the medium than I once thought. The experience allowed me to extrapolate the potential that lies down the road if VR hardware and software are continually developed hand in hand. In some ways, the industry is starting over from scratch with VR, and there are a lot of lessons left to be learned. As Oculus's VP of Product Nate Mitchell likes to put it, VR is like a house of cards. If you take one card out, such as the relationship between physical and virtual movements, the illusion crumbles. The fact is, the house of cards at present is just a foundation, but it's already attracting lots of money and attention. The industry is in a much better position to facilitate the dreams of artists and designers than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And with institutions like USC successfully adopting VR for mental health treatment, the implications of the tech outside of gaming will bolster its legitimacy in the short term and spur further funding and research in the long term. It's still the early days, but with the right experience under your belt, I think you'll agree that VR is the future. This time, it's here to stay.
So is this the dawn of the VR era in earnest? There are a lot of reasons to think so, but how much of that is just really hoping that it's true? I'm hopeful myself and desperate to play that Eve Valkyrie demo that Peter was talking about, but what do you folks think? Is a healthy skepticism necessary here, or are you all in on the VR future? Join me and your fellow prognosticators in the comments below as we discuss the very future of the medium we all love so much.
The visual display at the moment is crude. There are these crude cartoon-like characters. That's not the issue.